Welcome, 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 beloveds, to Nurture the Soul. I am your host today, Reverend Ellie Hutchison, and I am the Minister for Congregational and Community Engagement. And we are a part of the Love of Church at the national setting of the United Church of Christ. I use they, them pronouns and have a pixie blonde haircut with large gold rimmed glasses, a white ribbed blouse, and wearing earrings that are in the shape of a bird that are black, turquoise, and maroon. I use they, them pronouns again as a reminder, and I want us to consider that as you put your name into chat today. Let us know how you would like us to refer to you. Nurture the Soul is a weekly webinar series that provides you with a multitude of practical, educational, innovative, and formational resources to engage with the critical topics facing our communities right now. This webinar centers curiosity and care towards the collective liberation for all of God's creation. We feature an array of thought leaders to delve deeply into the topics that help us live into a gospel for such a time as this. Beloveds, we hope that this virtual space is a space for connection that cultivates a curious and loving community, and that you join us every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and from time to time look for special offerings. You can find a full list of our upcoming digital programs at www.ucc.org/events or on all of our social media platforms. Today, and all of our Nurture the Soul webinars are recorded, and a link will be sent out within 72 hours or so. Or you can always view the complete Nurture the Soul playlist on YouTube at the link that will be placed into chat. And for a limited time, I'm asking that if you are an artist and you are delving into art expression as a way to help us make sense of the world, please reach out to me via the email address that was used to remind you of today's webinar, or please invite others to the conversation. I'd love to highlight some of the work being done in an upcoming Nurture the Soul series. And friends and beloveds, if the conversations that you hear today move you, if they help to enhance your ministry or nurture your soul, we hope that you consider donating to the UCC Annual Fund. And you can do that by texting the letters UCC to the numbers 41444. These small tokens have a huge impact in helping us to resource you and your community in innovative and engaging ways. I want to thank you for supporting us and thank you so much for being here today. Before I introduce this week's guest, I want to remind you of the chat feature to share where you're zooming in from. Tell us your faith community, again, using your pronouns if you feel comfortable in doing so. And then also to use the Q&A feature. We will have an opportunity at the end of this webinar to engage Reverend Doctor into the conversation. You can find the chat and the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. Both of them look like dialogue bubbles. The Q&A has a question mark in the middle, and the chat feature has 3 dots, otherwise known as ellipses, in the center. This particular webinar today and our guest are a part of a longer series where at the beginning of every year of Nurture the Soul, we partner with Pilgrim Press and other publishers to highlight books that came out towards the end of last year or even the beginning of this year. And we have exciting topics, as you have already participated in, continuing throughout the summer as well. And today, though, I would like to invite author, pastor, and so much more, Reverend Dr. Beverly Dale to the screen. Y'all, we have engaged in conversation. We've seen presentations in the last 6 months or so from this amazing human, and what a gift it is to be alongside them at this moment. I want to welcome you to this virtual setting again, and I want to ask you, how are you doing? How do you find your soul today?
How I find my soul today was to give myself the gift of a nap. Sometimes you just have to listen to the body and say, shut down the mind, take care of the body. So for those of us who live in our minds, that's a really hard lesson for us to learn, but I'm working on it.
I love it. I love it. I think I love it because you speak so much of what I have been feeling this week as well. There's just so much swirling around, and I've shared with you before the start of this webinar how windy it is here. It's just a visual representation of how I feel and how I'm trying to collectively find myself in this moment. Yeah, I want to apologize. My screen might be shaky because I am not at my normal setting today. And so I have my computer sitting on a pillow, and I just realized how much I talk with my hands, which impacts if I'm holding them down on my screen. So I apologize for those of you who have noticed that I've been shaking. I will be more conscious of that. So, I'm curious. I'm curious at um, we're now in our third conversation with you in the last few months. Our initial contact, though, was to talk about this book that was, I believe, finally published because I got a pre-copy of it. Your book, Meditations on the Sexual Body. Who told you that you were naked? I want to ask you, how did you decide to come and write it? And then I really want to ask you about the format and why you thought the way you formatted the book was vital for us. Yeah, so
Mhm,
over to you.
mhm. Okay. Well, um, because of my own personal story and work I've done in ministry on a campus, Ivy League campus, I was aware of the big problems around the sexual body in the Christian church, having lived it. So I began to do professional work on that, training clergy and sexual health professionals to think more positively about the sexual body and how to do that. So that was my first book, Advancing Sexual Health for the Christian Client, Data and Dogma. So but I kept hearing from people saying, "Well, would that help me? Because I got issues." And no, it's not. It's really for professional seminarians or clergy. And so I thought, well, what would be a resource? Because there's not a heck of a lot of resources out there. So I wrote one. Um, and the idea is, how do I help people in the pews or people who have left the pews because I didn't hear any good news about the sexual body, or because they heard only repressive stuff and toxic stuff, or boxes that we had to be in. Um, so this is my response. And I put on my pastor's hat. So, okay, if you were sitting in my study, I think I know what some of your issues are because I've heard them in campus ministry. I've heard them in my churches. I've experienced in my own life. So I tried to write, there are about 70 plus essays and meditations that really grapple with each of those issues. And let me just list some of them. Pleasure. In my background, there's a lot of anti-pleasure stuff. It's about productivity, not pleasure. And in the church history, a lot of that. So, let's recover. How about a pleasure center Christianity? I mean, that's what I'm all for. I think that'd be a great idea. And my own sense of there's a heck of a lot of us inside the church who are still struggling to be pure and perfect in God's eyes, which is an incredible waste of time and was not from Jesus at all. So authenticity versus perfection is one of the issues that I work with. Sensuality, the whole thing around, I try to think of issues that people have about their body understandings of beauty. Um, and if our body is compromised, what do we do? If it's aging, what do we do? So all of those are topics that I cover in here, trying to bring grace, non-judgment, and a pleasure. It's okay. Your body is a miracle, and sexuality is a miracle in some ways, and we really need to incorporate that into our spirituality. So
Yeah.
that's why I did it.
I love that. But why meditation? What does meditation and the contemplation of things have anything to do with our sexual body?
Mhm, mhm. My sense that God is always speaking to us. We're not always listening. So what we have to do, what I have to do as a pastor is drop some seeds. I'm a farmer's daughter. All right. So I'm planting seeds and I'm going to give you some kind of radical ideas or stuff you don't hear from the pulpit about your body, and plant the seeds in short, 800 words or so is what I was aiming for. So it doesn't take long to read a meditation that will focus you on something specific, your aging body or your struggles with shame, or being told you shouldn't be gay, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And focus on that for a short period of time, and then to give you lots of meditation techniques or reflection techniques about, all right, if you've had any insights as you've read this, then let's do something with that in front of a mirror. Let's journal
Mm-hmm.
something. I'll give you lots of ideas on that. Let's move in certain ways that'll kind of get it out of your body and into the thin air where it needs to evaporate, that kind of thing. So the meditation I'm trying to be very focused. I use scripture, and I also include a prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that was really important because the manuscript I'm currently working on is about the God piece, and so the prayers never ever reference God as Father God Judge. That's the image that holds all the sex negativity, anti-pleasure stuff together throughout
Yeah.
2,000 years. So I use lots of creative metaphors and give you permission to think outside the box on that,
Yeah.
just in case that
Yeah.
metaphor is holding in the repressive stuff that you have heard or the trauma or abuse that you've experienced. Mm.
I, God, every time you talk, I have so many different avenues I can go into. So, you know, the way, and I think that my favorite part of the book is the way that you invite us to visualize our bodies, right? And and the visualization can come from the meditation. It can come from the ritual that you're introducing. It can come from seeing. It's like you invite us to be an active reader into the scripture, which is
Yes.
really, really exciting because so oftentimes that is left out, or that version, right, or that interpretation is left out.
Mhm.
Um, I'm super curious, your first section. So literally the first what 40 some pages is on the purity culture. Why start there?
Oh my goodness. I don't care if you're religious or not, you are impacted by the purity culture if you're under 40, for sure. Because that's been going on for at least 4 years, with a lot of church support. And so it's done a lot of damage, and the abstinence non-sex education stuff has done a lot of damage, although it's perfectly consistent in building that purity culture. So that has to be dismantled because that's where the shame is.
Hmm.
And so back to your first point about the getting visualization and whatever,
Mhm.
so many of us have been, if we're good Christians, quote unquote, and we're obedient Christians, quote unquote, then we're in our heads probably, and we're cut off from our bodies because that's where fantasies lie and needs and desires, and we don't know if they're good, and they're probably being told they're not, or that's where the trauma lies. So we have to get out of that left brain and use our internal eyes, our middle eyes, our real eyes, and movement and so forth to try to get into our bodies somewhere. So that was a deliberate strategy on my part. It's going first through the mental stuff, but also the other. Um, I do see the perfection need, the perfection goals in Christianity of being a good Christian. I mean, that's perfection stuff. That fits so nicely with purity culture. Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
purity culture, I guess we should define that. It's really um, it's the epitome of the body spirit split,
Mhm.
or the mind body split of Plato. That's where this all starts. It didn't start with Jesus, but
Right.
so we have to put this back together. And if you've been taught that all this down here is very suspect or sinful, unless it's carefully contained in a certain marriage container with the heterosexuality, etc. um, then you to go to that level is impure that and sinful, and we don't want to do that. So that has to be deconstructed. And so yes, I whole bunch of those first essays are addressing that issue, the purity culture. It's
Yeah.
dangerous and it's restrictive. And I do a lot of my work with sexual health professionals, and their offices are filled with people who have been damaged by the purity culture inside the church, the Christian church.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they bring their spouses in, and nobody's happy
Hmm.
with what's not happening in the bedroom, or with the fights
Hmm.
and the misunderstandings and the resentment, whatever, that's coming out of the bedroom because of the purity culture. I have one therapist friend who says, quote, "It's a hot mess out there." And she's referring to the
Yeah.
damage that is
Yeah.
instilled in us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so like we could have a whole entirely different conversation sharing about how we have encountered that even in our own personal lives, right? More so in our own
Yeah.
personal lives. But something that you just said that really has me thinking about the purity culture seems to like take away the idea of thinking that our body is sacred. And so, you're probably rightfully so. Your next section talks about um, bodily autonomy being sacred, about the sacredness of our bodies. Can you share a little bit more about that, perhaps what your thinking
Mhm.
was and what do you mean by bodily autonomy is sacred?
Oh my. Okay. So when you talk about moral autonomy, or your body being autonomous, what I'm doing there is butting up against you have to obey the rules. I'm really talking about our bodies are given as a sacred gift by the Creator, and it's all very good. And that statement does not mean, except for the genitalia and the fantasies that you have, So I'm butting up against, and I'm confronting and hopefully deconstructing that idea that it's all to be a Christian or a person of faith. You have to be obedient to whose rules are those? They're probably not yours. They were imposed on you. Um, and so, and in the culture is a problem. So, so autonomy and the whole piece around what I'm also butting up against is when you begin to discern spiritually for yourself what is a righteous way to live in this intimate relationship, or a righteous way of presenting myself in a culture, then then who's in charge? You are. And so I'm also butting up against the idea that you, in the obedience, that someone else is in charge. And I am saying, no, you're in charge. And where we start is God is with you, and thinks your body is sacred. And so what does sacred mean? Well, we don't know if we're cut off from the chin down. So let's get into the body, and let's examine some of this yucky stuff that we have are still retaining from bad sex education, or no sex education, or bad Sunday school classes that made you feel ashamed or guilty or so forth. I don't know if I answered you. I kind of lost myself in that.
Yeah, no, I had a really large question, right? Yeah, really thinking about a bodily autonomy as being sacred, moving from the shame into the sacredness. To me, it also sounds like you're playing around with the power differential. Who has the power to decide our bodies?
Right, right. And so right now we are seeing a lot of people who say they're Christian, religious, but pushing against trans people.
Hmm.
Like they know they're binary people, and they have the power over anybody who is not strictly gender binary.
Mm.
That's a power move. Such a power move.
Mm.
And of course, the heterosexual communities have been doing that for a long time, but particularly since the Anita Bryant 1970s thing is where it really caught on. Um, So yeah, there's a lot of power. And let me just go a little bit deeper on that, why that is. The empire
Mm,
runs on power over.
mm,
Some bodies have more value than other bodies. And it's in the empire's best mm, intention to keep you believing that some bodies have less value than you, because that keeps you in your lane,
mm,
right? So stay in your lane, your little binary lane or your heterosexual lane or whatever, is about keeping the stasis of empire, status quo, keep it going. As
mm.
opposed to if it's power with one another, we begin to build community and alliances, and we begin to push back against this power over model. Well, the empire can't have that, right?
Right.
So that's where this anti-trans stuff comes from. It is about power, but it's a bigger picture than that. It's really about that's how empires work.
Yeah.
And Christians, there are empire churches and there are empire Christians. And that we have to decouple from that. If we're going to follow Jesus, we have to decouple.
Yeah, yeah, that echoes exactly what the conversation was on Monday with Reverend Caleb Campbell, who talked about um, disarming Leviathan. Which just here talking about the power differential and then thinking about who is more worthy and who's not. It goes back to, for me, that reproductive justice conversation, how there are certain people who go on one side or who are side another way while also still being directly impacted. Well, we're all directly impacted by reproductive justice, but so
Mhm.
you have me thinking a lot about that. I wonder,
Mhm.
kind of, one that we talked about shame, bodily autonomy, we talked about power differential. Do you talk a little bit in your book about consent and communication at all?
I do. I have some, yes, I do.
I know. I know, I read
I
it.
I have actually I have one essay I'm really proud of. It's specifically in the title for heterosexual men,
Yes.
and telling them that what they think they want, the culture is telling them how not to get it.
Yeah.
All right. And so there's that essay, but there's others where I do drop in. If you don't have an enthusiastic hell yes, if I may use that word,
Hmm.
you don't have consent. All right. And so how many uh, partners, but particularly women, um, go ahead to have intimate relationships when they're really wanting closeness, or they're wanting a relationship that's beyond sexual, or that's not consent. That's manipulation, actually, if you're doing it for something, for somebody else's for
Yeah.
some other reasons. So yeah, I don't make it an issue, because I want it to kind of come out organically throughout all of these. I mean, if you're a grace-based church, right, and it's all about grace,
Yeah.
then we have to look at how consent comes in and out of that or not. So
Mm,
grace frees us. And
mm.
so we can say yes, no, and maybe, and not now, and maybe later, and all kinds of things um, when it comes to it. But we don't know that because we're busy obeying rules. I
Yeah.
don't know. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And I feel too that, like, throughout your book, in particular, the meditations have me thinking a lot more about, like, well, who am I? And who are we in the grand scheme of things, by also, if I'm giving myself the grace to be able to ask who I am, I'm hoping to give the grace to others to figure out who they are, and then what it might look like for us to come together. And so I wonder, can you share some of the meditations that kind of might ask us to think a little bit about who we are, um
Sure,
and who others are?
sure. I'd be glad to, but let me also point out that who we are sacred beings
Mm,
created for pleasure, and pronounced very good, according to the Creator. So who we are as a child of God, period, period, end. And that means that there's lots of grace, lots of love, but being human is a gift,
Mm.
and we're cutting all off. So, all right, let me read one.
Yes,
Let's see.
yes.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, I want to invite folks to go ahead and share your questions into the Q&A. You'll have an opportunity to engage with the author of this text and maybe even possibly plant some seeds, going back to that farming metaphor, that gardening metaphor. So that way, perhaps they could, Reverend Dr. Beverly Dale can come present to your faith community, your congregation association, conference. But go ahead.
Yes, yeah. I'm great. And the real title is Who Told You You Were Naked? And then the subtitle is Meditations on the Sexual Body. So I want to be a little racy in my titling here. All right, it comes from Genesis, of course. This one is a sensory invitation meditation, and the first King's verse is, look, a little cloud no bigger than a person's hand is rising out of the sea. Notice this little tiny observation. Imagine the following scenario, as if you were sitting on a park bench near a downtown park. First, you see a middle-aged male body slowly push itself along the sidewalk with one leg while the other rests horizontally on a scooter. Another human body is following a playful dog who is exhilarated to be off leash. A little body, about 4 years old, runs past as fast as those short little brown legs can run, maybe chasing butterflies or the dog, maybe just for the sheer joy of moving. Next is a passing family group of slightly overweight bodies, deep in conversation as their children playfully walk or skip alongside. The well-behaved children are absorbed in the freedom of the warm spring day, oblivious to the adults. Now you see that there are more bodies coming up the sidewalk, each moving at different speeds through this dimension we call space. Right now, here, in this time and space, each can detect a whiff of cinnamon and sugar coming from a corner bakery. It mingles with the smell of the sea air. The sound from the next block over is of surf crashing onto shore. A snapshot moment, even in imagination. Even, indeed, each moment is never to be experienced again. This is a sensory invitation in a spiritual life. It is a call to stop and take it all in. Take it in, every last drop. Become watchful. Hear the insistent call, the stream of sensual inputs. In our self-importance, it is easy to shut it all out. Yet these sights and sounds and smells inform, enrich, and enliven our spirits. Can we move out of our heads and move instead into our body? What sensory delights would bless our daily lives if we paid attention? Can we do that? And the prayer is, wondrous Creator, what gifts of abundance. Awaken our senses to the little things, puffs of clouds, rushing water sounds, flowers, fragrance, laughing children, cuddly kittens, warm hugs. Make us aware of the little touches of wonder available for us. Open our mind to take in the wonder of living. If need be, turn up the volume of the sensory alarm so we might respond with awe and thanksgiving. Our world is wonderful and awesome. Thank you.
Mm. Yes, I love that. And I feel like I want to share, if I may. When you were reading that, even though the first invitation was for us to be in the physical environment, right? On a spring day, geographically, I was there. I was like, oh, I live in this part of the country. And so this is what my spring day looks like. And how quickly I was taken away from that to center my imagination towards the bodies that were walking past. And I was inviting myself to like kind of think about where, like, what was I feeling when you described the image of the person walking by. Like I got really excited for the little kid who like was running and possibly chasing after a butterfly or a dog, right? But then I also saw myself more in the next description that came over with the bodies that might be a little bit larger, right? And I immediately felt in my body where I may have felt shame in that description, because of either how I identify or even how I identify some loved ones, right? And how quickly I came out of the space of noticing that it was a beautiful spring day and the joy of the child, and immediately caught myself feeling some kind of tension in my body.
Mm.
Um, and that then you gave us that prayer to be in that space. And so really, really powerful. And I share that specifically because, you did ask, do you want me to share anything from the book? Like, did you have any favorite meditations? I knew immediately where I wanted to go, right? You dog-eared the pages, but I half folded the pages down because those particular meditations sat with me and have found a way into like even my my conversations with my own congregation. And we may not even be talking about the sexual body. Like we're currently reading Octavia Butler's Parable, the Sower book, right? And so I've brought in this meditation and these ideas and concepts you've introduced into that conversation on who is it that we find community with. Um, and then I've also in my Finding Meaning and Hope program, which is a program that is helping to be in the familiar space with caregivers of those who are impacted by dementia and Alzheimer's. And I've been talking about the bodies in that space too because of your book. So I think I'm saying all of that to say this book, while it is talking about who told you that you were naked, meditations on the sexual body, it's so much deeper than that. There's so much intersectionality in just if you know somebody well enough that would be open to reading this book, but may be struggling with something else, I even recommend just giving them this book because if anything, it invites you, doesn't have you, it invites you to be in conversation with who you are. And so I'm grateful for that. So
Mhm.
thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted that you're using it in a lot of different settings. Yeah, yeah. The I set it up at the beginning about how the title came about. We were made to live in a sensual environment. The Garden of Eden is a garden of earthly delights. That's what that means. All right. And so once they chose to know good from evil, they suddenly knew that they were not creators. They
Hmm.
were living in love in the creation and with the creator, walking every day at sunset with the creator, according to Genesis. So now suddenly they decided that they couldn't be that vulnerable because now they felt separated. So the question is, who's telling you you are still separated from the creator? Who's telling you your body is not sacred
Right,
because of X, Y, and Z? Come
right,
on. You know,
right.
the love is still there,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. The love is,
Um,
and also how dare we, right? How do we dare like feel okay telling somebody that they can't feel or that they can't, be a certain way and those kind of things. And so that brings me to my next meditation that is my favorite. Would you be willing to share from that?
of course, of
Thank
course.
you.
This one is called Who is in the Mirror?
Mm.
And I probably could have written a lot with that title. So we'll see if you certainly liked where I went with it, so we'll go with that. The Bible verse is in 2 Corinthians, where Paul says, all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image. That's just a rich, rich verse. So who is in the mirror? If we were given the assignment to write down 10 things we do not like about our body, most of us could do that in record time. I've actually tried to do that, and it's true. However, if we are asked to write down 10 things we like about our body, the assignment becomes much more difficult and for too many, impossible. Why is this such a common phenomenon? We could begin counting the number of industries and businesses that depend on body dissatisfaction and low self-esteem. But few of us ever consider that a negative critique of our bodies is an insult to the Creator, who pronounced all of creation as good, including our bodies. All body negativity distracts from our ability to treasure both the beauty and the miracle that we all are. We can, however, replace our dissatisfaction with wonder at these incredibly miraculous body selves. Every single body is a working miracle. Just breathing in and out 17,280 to 23,040 times each day is a miracle. Those of us who live to be 80 will take more than 500 million breaths in our lifetime. How we came to these negative views of our bodies is of less importance than the deconstruction of them. This reversal of perspectives is a necessary spiritual practice. After all, we will neither protect nor adequately care for that which we do not treasure or value. It is only by loving ourselves, all of ourselves, that we can in turn begin to reflect goodness. It is only by embracing these miraculous bodies that we will be able to see others as the miracles they are as well. The spiritual call to loving acceptance is to look into the mirror honestly and with unveiled vision, confidently seeing the glory of God reflected back to us. The prayer is, God in our mirror, we confess we are consumed with ourselves and yet blinded from seeing the miracle that we are. Too often our negativity shields us from seeing our resemblance to you. Remove the veil from our faces and in our very being, in our walking and talking, living and loving. We may reveal to ourselves and others the miracles that reflect your glory. Thank you.
Yes, 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 yes. I love it. I think the part that I love so much about that is the multiple ways in which the veil can serve, right? You talk about how it is that we are self-centered, but yet we don't allow ourselves to feel pleasure. Like to there's a veil. And then seeing the veil between our understanding of what God sees us as, right? Or how God views us or imagines us to be. I want to move away from some of the seeing language, right? Because for lots of different reasons, right? So the image in which we are created, there's that veil to where the image that we are imagining is something different. And then there's the veil between us and other human beings. So I like the multiple ways that I came to understanding the veil when spending time in this particular particular part, this particular reflection. I did want to say, and there are some questions. There is a question in chat. We'll get to that in just a minute. I do want to invite others, any questions that you might have. Um, you have a pretty rich appendix. I'm curious, for selfish reasons, do you get together with the folks, the other thought leaders around this topic, and do you all have like the best dinners ever? And then, and then how do we move beyond? Because there's a lot in your book too that I've been on this what I forget what my therapist said. I keep returning to the TV shows that I've watched. You know, like I love Parks and Recreation. Like I love The Golden Girls. Like I love Sex and the City. I love all of these things and I keep returning to them. I'll watch it from beginning to end or I'll have it playing on in the background beginning to end. Like once a year I do this. And I've been doing this since the beginning of 2020. And she said that there's this trend about how we are returning to things that are familiar, and that are predictable, right? We know how these shows go. I am constantly amazed at the influence that Hollywood, that culture has on the ways that we identify our body. So in the times that you and all of these folks in the appendix get together for this really amazing dinner, can you not only help religious folks get better at this, but can you help entertainment folks get better at helping us accept our bodies? Because I often cringe at some of my favorite shows going, oh man, that hasn't aged well, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and can I be invited?
Okay. Uh, well, the answer is I pretty much operate on my own.
Mm,
The disciples of Christ are pretty autonomous in their congregational polity.
yeah.
So, no, all of these folks who doing wonderful good work in reproductive justice and gay and lesbian rights and trans issues, and, we're doing our good work, but we're not getting together. And it has been suggested to me that that there needs to be a huge conference of sex positivity. And as soon as somebody says, I'll fund it and help you plan it, we'll be glad to do that. I have a location already in mind of a church that said, yes, we'll do something like that.
Thanks.
So, yes, I think, okay, in my mind, it is this singular issue of the disconnect between the body and the spirit that is at the heart of what we're experiencing now, where the negativity, repression comes up and it's against you and you and you, and
Mm,
I'm up here, kind of a thing, because we do not focus on pleasure, sensual pleasure, as a culture, right? Unless you can purchase it, then it counts, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So, and there, we're back to the industries. So I would love to see Hollywood tackle this much more than it does. But for me, it's a matter of spirit. And so that would also, Hollywood doesn't have a good sense on what spirit is about because they don't think it sells, which is also problematic.
Yeah.
If that's the major dis-ease in our culture, then Hollywood does need to be addressing this in positive ways.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a huge dis-ease, but that includes all those Hollywood folks too, and making those decisions, or the funders who are not planning any kind of a big conference or celebration
Right.
to celebrate the human body.
Right.
Mm.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and let's face it, when we do that, when we begin to celebrate the body, what happens is other issues come up about immigration and deported bodies
Mm-hmm.
and teenagers, gay teenagers who are kicked to the curb by religious parents. All these other issues, reproductive justice comes in here, ageism comes in here. Um,
Yeah.
so if we're going to celebrate, we also have to recognize that there's a heck of a lot of damage that has been done because of that separation, and it takes form of these causes that I have mentioned and much more.
Yeah.
Mm. So I'm
Yeah.
ready to celebrate, and I'll be glad to lead the parade.
I'll help you organize it. And we just find
I
somebody
love
to
it.
fund it. There you go.
Yes, yes. I mean, if the church would finally get its act together about pleasure and sensuality, we would have people flooding into our church doors.
Yeah.
Why isn't the Christian church, in all of its names, why isn't it known as the party going place? Why aren't we celebrating life?
Right. Right. I know the last time you and I got to celebrate life together, it was at a drag show, and that was amazing.
It was so much fun, so much laughter, so much
Yes.
laughter.
Yes. Yes. And it was bitter cold for those performers that day, wasn't it?
Yep, yeah.
Um, we did have a question come in the chat, and I think it ties into kind of where it's a nice segue, is why do you think that trans folks are so threatening to others, especially the idea of a young person transitioning to another gender from where they're at to becoming at home to becoming something more truly themselves?
Mhm. Okay. The answer is found in the phrase that some bodies have more value than other bodies.
Mm,
And with trans people, you can't necessarily tell
mm,
what order they fit in the hierarchy.
mm,
So people are insecure about, well, are you going to be this level, which is male binary, or are you
mhm.
going to be here, female binary?
Yeah.
And so the trans, by the very existence of trans people, you call that into question. You
Mm,
call that into question, that hierarchy.
yeah.
And the empire doesn't like that because they have to know how to treat you
Yeah.
by where you are on that scale of value. So God bless them for being who they are. And if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. And the same can be
Right.
said of the gay and lesbian communities
Yep.
as well. Be who you are. And so you're not into this situation of heteronormativity. So what? That if we're going to dismantle, we just have to name it for what it is.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it's terribly, um, it's you can see the pain and suffering that this imposition of this value based hierarchy does to people's lives,
Mm,
children's lives. And
yeah.
it's a tragedy.
Yeah. 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 You know, I think my final question before we close out, and thank you for answering that. How have you engaged with somebody who is resistant to the message, either because of fear or hatred? Do you get to engage people who have opposite views than you do around this? And if so, what is a good first step for some of the folks to think about? Because I imagine people tuning into this particular webinar, already have a certain sensibility about this,
Mhm.
um, and
Mhm.
are interested in it. But how do we get the people who don't know about it and or might be opposing to it to be in conversation?
Okay. You have to understand people who are very rigid or judgmental, very much into an obedient mindset. That's all held together by fear.
Mm,
It's all fear, right? I have to know my place and I'll feel comfort there. Um, because if I get out of my place, then now I'm uncertain and now I'm afraid that I'll be judged by God, judged by the church, judged by my family, kicked out to the curb, whatever. So I think I'm a real believer in perfect love casts out fear. I
mm,
think that verse is what it's about. And recognizing the person in front of you who is spouting off some Bible verse to justify hatred or bigotry or whatever is deeply, deeply afraid. So I think it takes time and it takes a relationship, and it can only happen when you understand. I can be very not accepting of some of these folks, but
mm,
I can understand being afraid. I've been afraid. I know what it's like to live your life in fear.
yeah.
Um, so, how do I identify with that and then moderate my language in a way that can only be interpreted as kind, loving, and respectful,
Mm,
even as I disagree with no, no, my value system is different. And my value system is say that is judgmental, and I'm not to judge, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I love that. Hmm.
I wish I had a magic wand. It would be nice.
Right?
Here, drink this or whatever. We need, it would be wonderful. Um,
Yeah. We decided this isn't a new idea, obviously. We had leftover ashes from last year at the church where I am the associate, and it has glitter in it because why not? Because to Stardust we return, right? And it just reminded me of what you said. You wish you had a magic wand. I'm like, if we just had glitter, if we all just walked around with glitter, I know it's horrible for the environment, that and confetti, but like, what if we all had stardust? Um, I think my final thought for you is your dedication that you gave for in the front of your book. I thought was really, really beautiful. And I thought about each of the folks that you highlighted dedicating the book to how their humanity is under threat right now. And then you had said, may we together reconnect our bodies to the spirits and to repair our broken world. And I felt that as a wonderful call. Is there anything that you would like? So I'll read it. Are you okay? Or no, I'd like you to read it. Can you read your dedication page and who you dedicated the book to?
Alrighty.
And then we do have one more question that came in from the Q&A, and then we'll go after that.
Okay. I did dedicate this book to the healers among us,
Mhm.
pastors who teach liberation without condemnation, therapists and counselors who accompany us with a vision for sexual well-being, sex educators who combat harmful ignorance and promote health and healing, theologians who dig for spiritual truths amidst cultural distortion, teachers who open our minds, friends who love, support, and challenge us. And may we together reconnect our bodies to our spirit and repair our broken world.
I love that. And my archivist friend would love that you put the date in there, August 1st, 2023.
Yeah,
She says
yeah,
to date everything.
yeah.
And thank you for that. One final question, then we'll go. How can we address this topic in our churches so we can support each other's recovery? Even in progressive environments, it still seems so taboo or only appropriate for discussion in intimate groups. It's hard to know who has been affected by the issue, and sometimes we feel alone in the problem.
Mhm, mhm.
So, how do we address this topic in our churches? Other than inviting you out to preach and hold a workshop.
Which I can do. I really think the way to get at this is promoting freedom, freedom of thought, freedom to discern, free and to note the difference in our spiritual paths. They're all very different, and we've all had very different traumas and triggers and good things that have happened. And God winks, as some people call when God intervenes in our lives. Um, but to stress that diversity and um, and that we have freedom, so it lets people move into a place where those conversations about trauma and bad lessons and that kind of thing can occur. But to focus on linking the heart of Christian story of God in the
Mm,
flesh to our lives,
mm,
um, it has been disconnected. It's been
mm.
disconnected. There's this Jesus up here in heaven and all of that salvation stuff, but not liberation and not liberation of our spirits and our bodies. So there are ways of getting at that through sermons and through celebration activities in the congregation and instigating those conversations. Even as when we celebrate pleasure, we also must acknowledge that underneath a lot of this is a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse, and a lot of pain. And so we don't want to discount any of that,
Yeah.
but to acknowledge it's there. And the answer to that is we heal each other. We heal each other by
Mm.
opening ourselves up and say, I love you, I accept you. Let's let's party together. Let's be on this same journey together towards love.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I love you.
Well, thank you, Ellie.
I want to thank you so much for joining us today. What a gift that you are in this world. And for everybody who tuned in, who shared comments in the chat or asked questions, or who sat silent and were taking it all in, thank you. This is one of the many steps to finding joy and partying together, if you will. I know that this will not be our last time in conversation. Reverend Dr. Bev. And I just want to say thank you so very much for who you are. And I want to invite everyone back next Thursday, this time at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, for part 3 of our multi-part series titled Rooted in Faith. Women have played a critical role in the struggle for Palestinian rights and liberation, and over the decades have also been victims of the realities of the occupation, the displacement, and the violence. Join this special webinar when we get to hear from personal accounts inside and outside of Palestine on this very important topic. This will highlight just a chapter in the new book called Rooted in Faith with Justice and so much more. And so we look forward to being with you all at 12 noon next week. Remember, this is recorded. A link will be sent out, or you can check our YouTube page in the next 72 hours. Reverend Dr. Beverly Dale, can you please take us out in benediction?
I certainly can. And let me do one of the exercise phrases of that last essay
I
is
love it.
looking at a mirror, looking at yourself in a mirror, and listen to these words. I am in you, and you are in me. We are made in the image of goodness. Look in the mirror. Go into your world, look into the mirror, and see the sacred. Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.